Leaders of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have given the junta in Niger Republic 1 week to reinstate President Mohamed Bazoum or face sanctions and the possible use of force. A representative of the bloc will be dispatched to Niger to deliver the demands of the authority. State House correspondent Adesua Moran reports.
Regional leaders under the aegis of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, are meeting in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, for an emergency meeting to address the political situation in Niger. After a closed-door session, the leaders unequivocally declared their support for President Mohamed Bazoum's legitimate government and strongly condemned the audacious coup in the country.
His Excellency President Mohamed Bazoum remains the legitimate elected President and Head of State of the Republic of Niger, recognized by ECOWAS, the African Union, and the international community. In this regard, only official acts of President Bazoum or his duly mandated officials will be recognized by ECOWAS. 2. Condemn in the strongest terms the attempted overthrow of constitutional order in Niger and the illegal detention of His Excellency President Mohamed Bazoum, President and Head of State of Niger, as well as members of his family and government. Reject any form of resignation that may purportedly come from His Excellency President Mohamed Bazoum.
Part of their resolutions include a 1-week ultimatum of a full restoration of constitutional order. Failure to do so will attract military intervention.
To this effect, the chiefs of defense staff of ECOWAS are to meet immediately. Condemn the pronouncement of support by foreign governments and foreign private military contractors.
The regional bloc also closed land and air borders while blocking all commercial and financial transactions with member states.
Institution of ECOWAS no-fly zone on all commercial flights to and from Niger. Suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and Niger. Freeze all service transactions, including energy transactions. Impose travel ban and asset freeze for the military officials involved in the coup attempt. The same applies to their family members and the civilians who accept to participate in any institutions or governments established by these military officials.
President Bola Tinubu, who also serves as ECOWAS chair, emphasizes the need to go beyond mere talks and implement concrete actions to protect democracy and stability in the region.
Without freedom and democracy, there can be no development. There can be no end to poverty. I want us to be strong, forceful, and resolute about the survival of Bazoum, as well as the freedom and restoration of the constitutionally elected body in the Niger Republic. It's time for action, and we should walk our talks.
The United Nations expresses concerns about the impact of the unconstitutional change on vulnerable populations and regional security. However, they are optimistic that the resolutions from the meeting will pave the way forward.
The agencies, funds, and programs of the United Nations country team in Niger are present and continue to deliver much-needed assistance to vulnerable populations. On behalf of the Secretary General, UNOWAS and the entire United Nations system remain available to work closely with ECOWAS in the spirit of complementarity in support of the people of Niger and other countries in the region going through difficult times in the realization of their legitimate aspiration.
The coup, which resulted in the illegal detention of President Bazoum, members of his family, and government officials, has drawn international condemnation. ECOWAS leaders have branded the situation a hostage crisis and have laid the responsibility for President Bazoum's safety squarely on the shoulders of the coup plotters. With a one-week ultimatum now issued to the coup plotters in Niger, one thing is certain: ECOWAS is determined to protect Niger's democracy, and any attempt to derail it will not go unanswered. The clock is ticking, and Niger's fate hangs in the balance. Adesua Omoruan, Arise News.
Joining us now on the morning show to discuss the decision of ECOWAS and what to expect in the coming days is Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, Nigeria's former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Good morning, Professor Akinyemi, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Dr. Abati. And good morning, Rufai.
Morning, Prof. Good to see you again. Bless you, sir.
Morning, sir. Well, quickly, Prof. Adesua Omoruan was saying Niger's future hangs in the balance. And now, in addition to that, ECOWAS has imposed sanctions, the same way ECOWAS did in Mali, in Guinea-Conakry, and Burkina Faso. Any hope that these sanctions will work this time around, other than imposing more hardship on the poor people of Niger?
Thank you for inviting me to be on your platform this morning. Earlier on, I had listened to your very robust conversation, as you call it, on the Nigerian crisis. And I tried very much to distill what you said and what do you stand for. Are you for military intervention or you are against military intervention? And at the end of your debate or your conversation, I really couldn't draw any concrete conclusion as to where Arise Morning Show stands. And it reminds me of the debate once in the House of Commons on whether they should ban whiskey or not. Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister. And as usual, he's spoken on both sides of the debate. So finally, the leader of opposition tried to pin him down. Prime Minister Winston, are you for banning whiskey or not? And Churchill replied, if by whiskey you mean that drink on which we impose taxes, value-added tax, excise duty, and the money we make from it allows us to provide milk for young children, put money in NHS, support the social welfare program in Britain, then I am for whiskey. But if by whiskey you mean that drink that drives a man to the gutters, that he forgets his way home, then I am against whiskey. So, the issue is, we are faced now with a corner. Where do we stand on the issue of military intervention? Now, let me tease out a few of the complications on this matter. Once President Tinubu said in Guinea-Bissau that the parameters of his leadership in ECOWAS, and by implication the parameters of his foreign policy, was going to be anti-coup, anti-terrorism, and when he got to Nairobi, he included democracy, I knew sooner or later somebody was going to challenge him because he's drawn the line in the sand and he's made it so definitive. But I must confess, unlike some of the experts who have said they were expecting it, I must confess I was not expecting that the challenge will come from Niger. For several reasons. The Americans have a military base there. The French have a military base there. There have been no demonstrations on the streets. The anti-jihadist and anti-terrorist crisis in Niger seems to be on the low burner. So I wasn't expecting that the challenge will come from Niger. The issue that I find difficult to come to terms with and to answer is what led to this coup. Usually, with the conspiracy theorists that we usually have, there will be, by now, accusing fingers point at the usual suspects. France, Western countries, Wagner Group. But the more you confront these explanations, the more you find the loopholes in them. This was a coup led by a team which was an ally, a military team, which was not only a protective unit of the Presidential Guard, but also led by a general who comes from the same area as the president he has overthrown, and who was his ally. If it was France that was behind it, why are they burning down the French embassy? The Wagner Group is not on the ground in Niger, so it cannot be the Russians. And in any case, Putin had come on the side of the African countries to criticize the coup. So, what has led to this coup? And I dare say I have no answer to that. Nevertheless, ECOWAS has now taken a stand. Before we dissect the consequences of ECOWAS decisions, which would directly answer the question put to me by Dr. Abati, let me point out one thing. ECOWAS and African Union, even though they seem to be on the same wicket, actually they are not. Under the tradition of the African unity, something they copied from the OAU, ECOWAS is supposed to take the lead in the response to what I need this thing in my ear, please. ECOWAS is supposed to take the lead in confronting the issue in, I'm sorry. Right. Okay, I'm sorry. ECOWAS is supposed to take the lead, and then the African Union will follow up. Instead, the African Union took the lead in responding to the issue in Niger. Why? This was something masterminded by South Africa to thump President Tinubu in the face. It was an anti-Tinubu action by the African Union. Why do I say that the South African is behind this? there's a video that is going around which showed an analysis on South African television station which blames Tinubu for the coup in Niger, that it is because President Tinubu is illegitimate, because his election is contentious, etc., that the coup had happened. Now, this is coming from a nation where their president has an anti-corruption charge still hanging around his neck, and which the majority view, the majority party, the ANC, in parliament, he had used to overturn the decision of a judicial panel which had found him guilty of corruption. This is coming from the same South Africa that is now blaming President Tinubu. So the AU stepped quickly into the breach in order simply to thump President Tinubu in the face. Now, ECOWAS has now put itself, if you want to put it that way, by now imposing a 7-day limit for a reaction, while African Union gave them 15 days, creating a hiatus that, if you like, the Niger regime can exploit by saying we will listen to the African Union rather than the ECOWAS. We should keep that in mind because, in fact, the problem for ECOWAS is not being posed by the Western countries, it's being posed by the African Union, being instigated by South Africa. Now, we have the decisions taken by ECOWAS yesterday, and it's as blunt as they come. Dr. Abati has said, what is different here that did not happen in Mali, Burkina Faso? So, I mean, I spotted two things immediately. Probably there will be more. The first thing is, usually, when you give an ultimatum, you wait for the ultimatum to expire before you impose sanctions. So you give them those 7 days of grace. ECOWAS didn't do that. And so this is different from what they did in those other countries. They imposed immediately sanctions without waiting for the 7 days to expire. And this is sending the signal that we mean business. Number two is saying we don't roll out military action. Once you said that, you've boxed yourself in, ECOWAS has boxed itself into a corner. Because after 7 days, if the regime does not change its mind, then ECOWAS will have to embark on military action. What are the chances that two questions. The first one is the military regime likely to change its mind? You know, as a diplomat,
yes, sir,
I would have advised that you don't box a government into a corner where it will lose face in its reaction to whatever you put before it. Right. And in this case, I agree with Rufai that behind the scenes, behind the chairs, diplomatic actions should be taking place. And I don't rule out that is taking place. They are not going to tell us it is taking place. Diplomacy doesn't work that way. Some actions you will be told. Some actions you will not be told.
All right.
A signal to the regime that they mean business. Sorry?
Yes, Professor Akinyemi. I was just going to ask you now, and thanks so much for saying that. Can I ask, I'd like to interject at this point to ask you with regards to, in the event that whether it is overt or covert diplomatic conversations are going on between ECOWAS and the junta. What happens if it falls through and they don't agree at the end of the 7 days ultimatum? Number one, what's the cost? What would the cost of war look like? We had shared earlier around the fact that Nigeria would potentially bear majority of the cost of the war, because when you look at the ECOWAS region, we are strongest in terms of military might and capital. What would be the cost? And beyond capital, it's also the cost for Nigerians themselves. The humanitarian cost of a war at this time, can we afford it? Or well, perhaps not a war, but at least a military intervention in Niger. Can we afford it?
Well, you see, make up your... This is part of... That's why I started by making that reference to Winston Churchill's position on whiskey. Make up your mind. Do you want Nigeria to be the giant of Africa or not? I will again make reference to Rufai. I don't mean to put you on a spot, but I still remember what you said when the Sudan crisis blew up and there was this question about evacuation of citizens, that, what we were wishing for was, Nigeria going in, with its interventionist troops, protecting its citizens, extracting them and so on, that this is what you expect of Nigeria. There's a cost to policy. There's a cost to action. If you want Nigeria to be the voice, the giant of Africa, you have to pay for it. Let me make reference to a development in another part of Africa which we seem to be ignoring. Kenya, it's had the same problems as Nigeria. A contested election, still demonstrations and riots on the street of Nairobi and other cities in Kenya over economic policies, tax, the imposition of tax on goods and services and what have you. And yet, what has it done? It has dispatched troops to the Congo, DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo, as part of the East African interventionist force in the Congo. And 3 days ago, it announced it was ready to send 1,000 police as part of its own contribution to Haiti. That's not even an African country. That's a projection of Kenya's power. Not soft power, Kenya's power across the ocean to Haiti. Now, who is the giant in Africa? Is it Kenya or is it Nigeria? So, please, this issue that is always raised, how much will it cost us? It will cost us money. But this is a situation where, if you look at it, we have the support of France, European Union, and the United States. We are not going in there to fight against a superpower. Therefore, the cost will be minimal compared to if, say, we were going there to fight French forces or we were going to go there to fight American forces. I expect that, we will get the support of intelligence that the Americans can provide. We will get probably air cover from the American Air Force that is based there, and we will get all kinds of support so that really what we will have against Nigerian forces, if it comes to boots on the ground, and it will have to be boots on the ground, unless the regime, if confronted with the certainty of ECOWAS, Nigerian forces, then decides to go for a diplomatic solution to the problem.
Okay.
The Nigerian what will be the cost to them? Of course, there will be a cost to them. There is always a cost in any crisis that you have. Even right now, there is a cost to them. The EU, that has been providing probably the highest economic aid to Niger, has cut that off. Do you think that is not going to impact on the life of the Nigerians? The crisis has been created, is confronting a regional bloc. There will be cost all around.
Okay, so yes, everybody keeps touting war, boots on the ground. At first, you talked about the South African dimension, and when you were talking about that, they're talking about the legitimacy of our president on the South African channel and all of that. And you said, oh, South Africa has problems with their president. But let's not also forget, this is the same South Africa that their former president went to jail. Can we ever have that happen in Nigeria as we speak today? They have a system that works and holds their leaders accountable. Do we have that? That's a big question. Secondly, the costs as regards our very porous border, the fact that you pretty much have borders with Niger, that is one of the most porous borders you can ever think of the world. Arms proliferation and importation of these armed groups if Niamey goes on fire. Also, the cost probably on our newly acquired Super Tucano jets. I know, yes, if we put boots on the ground, we can round up the Nigerian troops. Cumulatively with the gendarmerie and the troops, they're about 12,000. That's the strength of the Nigerian army. Poorly equipped, one of the most poorly equipped. Not a seasoned army, not like, our Chadian counterpart, Idris Deby's army. Who is going to bear that cost? Vis-a-vis our own economic situations on the ground. Because it's not going to come cheap. Putting our planes in the air to be able to ensure a no-fly zone. Is the West going to do that with us with their drones? And the fact that our backyard has now become a theater of some sorts for these foreign players. And in the midst of all of this, hope we remember that when this squabble starts, it's not just going to be the ECOWAS boots on the ground and the Nigerian forces. It's also going to be the terrorist group, the likes of the Akims of this world that are in the Sahel area, and the likes of many other splinter groups, bandits and all of that will make incursions into our hitherto porous border, vis-a-vis the already existing circumstance we have, even in Cameroon, where some of the Ambazonia crusaders are already filtering into our borders through Taraba. Those are conversations as regards the costs. And also, let's add Russia in that Molotov cocktail, no pun intended.
Well, Rufai, you are throwing into the pot issues that do not belong in the pot. I mean, if you are making a pepper soup, you don't throw in things that come from making a goosey soup. You separate the ingredients. I mean, I find no relevance to whether we've never jailed a president in Nigeria to South Africa jailing there. I find no relevance of that to what we are talking about. Number two, whether we intervene or not, some of the issues you have raised are issues which we are confronting. Whether we intervene or not, the Amazon incursion in the Cross River area is already there. It's something which we will have to confront sooner or later. The issues you have raised relate to the fact that Nigeria is surrounded by long, porous borders. And the fact that we are not even getting involved, we have not got involved, and yet we have to confront these issues, to me, so that sooner or later, the problems posed for Nigeria by the fact that we are surrounded all by French-speaking countries and porous borders are issues which we will confront. And you haven't raised that. I hope that the policymakers are listening to this. They will have to confront it. These are some of the issues we should have confronted in the 70s. And some of us who were involved in policy making raised these issues. Maybe this is not, the time to identify what we said to various heads of states, whether it was Murtala Mohammed or IBB, about what to do in Equatorial Guinea, what to do in Cameroon with Bakassi, what to do here and do there, what to do in Benin Republic, that they ignored. So these issues will always be there. They have nothing to do with how we react to the events that have taken place in Niger. Even if you leave the coupists alone in Niger, the coup that has taken place, how will that deal with the issues they themselves, the jihadists, the ISIS, that they confront coming down from the Sahel? How would they deal with it? Would they be able to deal with it? Would they be able to defeat it? There are historical issues. France bears some of the blame for this. In fact, France bears a lot of blame for this because it is simply there, and yet these jihadists, the terrorists, continue to play a role in the whole of the Sahel, that you then just wonder whether France is not deliberately underplaying its own power in dealing with these people. Because if France had wanted to defeat the terrorists, it probably would have done so while Libya was still in a unified form. But now that Libya is disintegrating and all those forces have crossed not into the Mediterranean, but they've crossed into the Sahel, that has nothing to do with Nigerian policy, and yet we will have to confront it. So I believe that we should separate, what is the language that people use? We should separate the ingredients from pepper soup from ingredients from egusi soup and concentrate on the issue that we are confronted with.
Prof, I assume that maybe I'm misinterpreting you, but I assume you are saying that military action may be inevitable in Niger. And of course, we know that will be led by Nigeria, more or less. Do you think President Tinubu is politically stable enough in office for him to take Nigeria into military operation in Niger and confront the Russian bear that seems to be around the place on behalf of the US and France? Is he himself as president in Nigeria politically stable enough? And then the second thing about conspiracy theories. Will you say that Bazoum's plight is self-inflicted because he comes from a stock that is considered a foreigner stock, Shua Arab, about 2 to 5% of the entire population? And then as president, he initiated reforms, including saying that anybody in his government should not take a second wife. And that whoever wanted to take a second wife should leave his government. Could that be part of the problem? Identity politics and the pace of his reforms.
Oh dear. Oh no, I don't know why God has inflicted some of these leaders on Africa. I don't know what having a second wife has to do with one's role in government. Number one, first of all, whether President Tinubu is stable enough is not an issue for me to debate on this platform. He's taken a decision. ECOWAS has backed him on that decision, and it's the consequences of that decision that I believe, it's my job, it's my role to deal with. Number two, I disagree with you that we will confront Wagner in Niger. Wagner is not on the ground in Niger. They've offered their support, and it is true that Russian flags are being flown and being waved in Niamey and in other cities. But I have also pointed out that two things. Putin himself had opposed this coup that has taken place and has backed African Union and ECOWAS decision on it. That's number one. Number two, if Wagner decides to go in there, they will have to fight French and British troops, not Nigerian troops, to even get into Niger. We are not talking about Mali, where they're already present. They have no presence in Niger. Number three, we must not forget that whether the president overthrown is of Shua Arab descent or not, he did win an election. And as I said, there have not been demonstrations on the street, whether for economic reasons or political reasons. There have not been demonstrations. This is before the coup I'm talking about. And the man who has even overthrown him, I understand, has less than a year to go before his tour of duty in the armed forces expires. Is that the reason behind the coup? Nobody's been able to explain convincingly why this coup took place. So to that extent, I'm at a loss, as to why this coup took place. I'm at a loss. But again, we go back to the issue of whether there is a price to be paid or not. I mean, please don't misunderstand me. I am not a gun-ho militarist. In fact, I would prefer crisis to be resolved diplomatically. But once an organization to which you belong draws a line in the sand, and that's the red line, and you decide to cross that line, actions have consequences. That's something you are always saying on this program. And to that extent, what the troops in Niger have done have consequences. And that's why you have military. That's why you have military forces. When you sign in to join the military, you know there are consequences to signing on. And that also involves possible loss of life. You don't join the military to be, if it's picnics you want, you join a Boy Scout movement. So why I am not being flippant with the lives of Nigerian troops, but the fact is, we have an army, and where issues of national interest
on that note
are concerned, and the commander-in-chief decides that calls for deploying armed forces, then it will simply have to. But I must again re-emphasize that we are going to have major problems, which you already have with porous borders. And what to do about those porous borders, even after this Niger crisis is over or not, is a major issue we must confront in this country. Our borders are too porous.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. On that note, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us on the morning show and for honoring our invitation always. Before we move on, the breaking news again. President Bola Tinubu will make a broadcast to the nation today at 7 p.m. Television, radio stations, and other electronic media outlets are enjoined to hook up to the network services of the Nigerian Television Authority and Radio Nigeria for the broadcast. The statement is signed by Dele Alake, Special Advisor to the President.